ready to get started. So. All right, everyone. Appreciate you guys joining us. And today is not July 27th. So apparently I changed that and then changed it back. So, but today is September 14th, and we're going to get kicked off with our community meetup for the day. And we have Eric Lamb with us, who's going to talk about unit tests and expression engine. So I hope everyone's excited to hear about that. Again, the event usually opens about 9:50. I think 9:50 or 9:45. So always feel free to hop on early, share your audio, video, and the purpose of these meetups are to, basically have them like a meetup you would in person, where we get on and we hang out. This morning we were talking about pets and what's going on in our life and all sorts of things, and it's just good to see each other. Expression Engine is really built upon the community, and we always want to foster that. And really, as the Expression Engine Conference team, that's our mission, really. We put together these meetups and the spring conference and the fall summit and all this just to foster the community and continue its growth and continue help new people get involved with it. A lot of us have been around the community for many years, some of us more than others. And, it's one of the best communities out there around a piece of software. So definitely want you guys to come hang out. Also, give props to the EE committee. If you see any of these guys or gals around Slack or in our events, or if you're in Philly, be sure to come say hi to us. They do a lot of work throughout the year to make these events happen. And if you haven't caught wind yet, the EE Conf as a brand is really trying to turn into an event provider for Expression Engine events with all the events that we have throughout the year. So if you have other ideas on events you would like to see or meetups you'd like to make happen, we had Andrew over in Slack yesterday talking about doing one for the Australia time zone. And so we're going to work with him and hopefully put that together. Other than that, if you're new to our events, make sure you look at our code of conduct at eeconf.com/code of conduct. Of course, we want to treat everybody with respect and kindness, no matter your background or anything about you. So basically, that always boils down to don't be a jerk. If you do have any issues, if you feel like our code of conduct has been violated in any way, make sure to go there and fill out that form. And that form will email the conference team as well as notify us immediately in Slack, and we can take care of that as soon as possible. Of course, whether today for the meetup or, for today, we really want you to be in the chat. But, the EEConf channel and Expression Engine is a great place to meet people, talk about the next meetup, talk about the next event, hang out, just continue to grow the community. Anytime there's more events happening, we'll post in there as well. If you do have questions, we'll have Eric kind of present and I'll monitor chat. There's two ways to ask questions after his talk is over. We'd love to have you share your audio and video and ask questions in person. Again, we want to kind of be like a meetup, see each other, hear each other, all that. But also you can use the Q&A tab on the top right of your chat if you're on a desktop. Make sure to use that. I'm going to monitor that throughout the chat, and then either at breaking points or at the end, we'll go through all the Q&A. Try to ask all your questions in the Q&A. If you just ask them in the general chat, it's kind of hard to monitor that, as sometimes those questions get lost. You guys are welcome to discuss and go back and forth during the session in the chat, but we're really going to be looking through the Q&A to monitor those questions. Of course, we always want to thank our sponsors. They make these events happen for us throughout the year. The reason we can do these events for free is because of our awesome sponsors. And so Cartthrob and Hop Studios are gold sponsors this year. Silver sponsors, Greenline Creative and Triple Nerd Score. Bronze sponsors, W3Care and IC360. And then Creative Arc is our friends of EE level. If you're interested in supporting Expression Engine as a sponsor, or just donating, you can go to eeconf.com and click on the Get Involved menu, and you can become a sponsor or just donate. Again, we do not profit from this. Everybody on that EE conference team that you saw has worked on this, many of us for many years now, just of our own free will and our own free time. We don't do this for profit. We are not for profit. And so any help, any love you can give us definitely helps make these events bigger and better. Sponsorships are for an entire year. So we have some mid-year pricing since it's already past the mid-year right now. Or next year, if you want to sign on in January, basically you're promoted on all email, social media, events, all that kind of stuff throughout the entire year. So it's a great value, great way to get your name out there, great way to show your team, your clients, and the community that you support, the Expression Engine community and all that we're about. All right, so I'm going to be quiet for a while, and I'll hand it over to Eric. If you don't know Eric, he's the owner of Mithra 62, which is, I guess, custom software development, really, and any of your needs around Expression Engine and other stuff. I know Eric's been around the community for many years before me, for sure, and I've only really got to know him over the last year or so more personally. He's been a great guy to get to know, always willing to help the community, always willing to speak his mind and helps improve the software in the community with all that he does. So we're excited to have him today. And so Eric, I'm going to hand it off to you. And just like normal, I'm going to close my audio video here, but I'll be around. You can just yell if there's any issues or if you need me to hop back on for anything. And then I'll definitely hop back on to help you with questions and handling all that at the end. So Eric, thank you for joining us today. And thank you for taking the time. So I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. All right. So like Andy said, I am Eric Lamb, otherwise known as Mithra 62. Been around the community for a good long while. So kind of feel like I have a few things that I can share. And today we're going to talk about unit testing. Unit testing and Expression Engine, but mostly unit testing, at least in the beginning, because you got to have a foundation before we can start merging the two. So one of the things that I've noticed, and pretty sure I'm not alone in this, but not that many developers are doing unit tests anymore. Not sure exactly what had changed that paradigm, but unit testing, it's generally not as dominant as it was maybe 10 years ago in our development flow. So we're going to kind of take this from a big elevator view of what are unit testing, and let's show you guys some examples of it and walk through all the various minutia of it. And so unit tests, right? Predominantly one of my favorite parts about development, honestly, because it's one of the things that allows you to solidify your code base. And my nose is itching. So solidify your code base into something that you can really kind of rely on and depend on and have a decent level of confidence in. Give you an idea of what they are. Expression Engine has a very deep unit testing suite. If you do any development on their core code base, it comes along in there with the Git branches, and you can see a very deep well of unit testing. They test everything from the table class to the new form object, various controllers. But essentially what the point is that you can solidify your code into a state of knowing how it's going to end up. So essentially kind of locking it down. So let's get into it. All right. So to start, what are unit tests, right? I like to say that they're confidence. I kind of like that tact because it essentially allows us to sleep better. I built a thing, 10 months later down the line, client wants me to change the thing. I can have confidence that whatever I'm doing 10 months after the fact didn't break what I did 10 months before. They're really nugget-sized methods for peace of mind. It's it allows changes to happen without breaking anything. Another side part of that is they're essentially blueprints. This doesn't really get talked about too much whenever you see a unit test article or a presentation, but one of the neat pieces of unit tests is they're basically blueprints for how code works. So what I tend to have happen if I have to go in and use a third-party library or something, I just go and look at the tests. I'll see what the tests are because that's going to show me exactly what the intent was from the main developer, how they expected their code to run, how they expected their methods to operate. it's all right there. So it's almost like a deeper well of insight than just the docs. And plus, as we know, docs can get pretty well out of date, but tests generally don't. As long as everything passes, then it's going to outline exactly how a program works. This is especially helpful around child objects when you're working with something and you don't know how the parameterization works, what the flow is. The unit test will highlight all of that. So little tip there, they're pretty great. The benefits, like I said, they're peace of mind. It really is peace of mind, allowing you to look your client in the eye and say, oh, sure, I can do that, with knowing that it's not going to break anything. It really takes a load of stress off of our lives when you can look your clients in the eye and say with confidence, yes, absolutely, this is fine. When you're writing code that is testable, it makes it into a clean and a readable format. There's a style we'll get into in a minute called dependency injection, but essentially that's a paradigm that most developers can easily recognize. And when you write your code in this way, it forces you down a path of having some cleanliness to your code. So it's not to be underestimated. I mean, essentially you make A today, B tomorrow, and you know that B isn't going to break A. So it's very, very nice. Like many things, there are a ton of tools for unit testing. Probably too many tools, if we're being honest. You can Google it, top unit testing tools for PHP, and there's like a good 20 libraries. Most of them you're probably not going to use. Reason being is that there's a king, and that king is PHP unit. But there are still other tools available for it. So there's things like Selenium, which is actually another really, really good one, where in your unit test flow, you can do what are called Selenium integration tests, but basically making sure that nothing really breaks at the browser level and allow you to test things more than just the individual. But really, at the end of the day, there's four main ones. There's PHP unit, there's Codeception, Selenium, and Behat. Behat is actually also pretty interesting. It's very much like PHP unit, but it has its own wrapper for language paradigm and how you can write and describe your tests. Not a big fan of how that works, but I know a lot of people are. So something to kind of keep in mind. The PHP unit is primarily what we're going to talk about today, but don't underestimate Selenium and Behat. I'm not very familiar with Codeception, but there's a thriving community around it, so I wouldn't begrudge it. This is kind of where we need to get a little real, though. When I first started getting into unit testing, it was a splash of cold water. I didn't realize how, well, frankly, untestable my previous code was. And the reason why, it's kind of the same thing that all of us have, right? We come into coding, we start writing procedural code, and then we start learning about objects and methods and interfaces and all that wonderful stuff. But at the end of the day, a lot of our code is still procedural code wrapped up in methods, which isn't testable. It's just not. So in order to write testable code, or in order to test your code, you have to write testable code. And that was a real bitter pill for me to swallow initially. I can't even really put into words how rough that transition was for me. So I don't expect anybody else to have that same thing or to not have it. It's humbling. It really was. You think you're a good programmer, and then you kind of find out like, oh, okay, wait, maybe my code's not as grand or great as I thought it was. Certain things like we just touched on with the procedural objects and essentially domain overlap. That was another thing where you have requirements that are essentially like you have a database object that requires your email object that also requires the entire input layer of a HTTP post flow. Where like that's not testable. You can't have code like that and have confidence that it's still good. this, how can I put this? So we're going to get into something in a second called dependency injection. And what this basically boils down to is it's just a coding technique. It's instead of going in your code and calling a service or instantiating an object, you pass that object off to your method or to your primary object that you're trying to use that functionality for. CMSs and frameworks, unfortunately, make this very difficult. It's just the nature of how they go. I haven't really seen any CMS or really any framework that doesn't intermingle their stuff to like the nth degree. We can get around it, and it's certainly not something that should stop us from doing anything, but it is something to be aware of. So we're going to have to change how we write our programs. So just to give you an example, this is bad code. If this is untestable code. If anybody have any reason or any thoughts or confusion as to why, I just discovered that I have a laser pointer thing, so we can go ahead and do this, but it's this line. We can't do that anymore. What we do instead is this, where we just pass it as a parameter, right? This is a testable method. We can go ahead and create up a mock object and send it into as the foo parameter. And then everything right there is testable. We can write all the tests we want on this. Another way of doing it is to use getters and setters. So you have an object. Let me turn off my laser pointer. You have an object, and you set it up to have these as parameters. A couple of my clients in here right now might recognize this coding style right there. And most of it is because I like, even if I don't write tests, I like my code to be testable. So there's something to keep in mind. All right, so that said, we kind of need to get into some stuff. Running tests. It's a good idea to think about your tests as a test suite, right? So the way that testing usually works is you have a test suite, you have test cases, and then you have tests that assert certain things. So you do all of this just like any other PHP program. You have your composer file, and you just say include in PHP unit, and it'll go ahead and install it as a dependency, and then you can go ahead and just run your tests right there. You'll set up composer like normal. You'll run your normal composer install. To execute it, we'll end up calling something called, the command will be vendor bin PHP unit. Pretty standard. Lots of configuration with it though. So one of the things is, take a look at this. This is a bare bones, very bare bones PHP unit.xml file. This is the preferred method, or at least my preferred method, to pass around and configure options for your testing. But there is another way where you can do it as command line parameters. Don't do that, because this way it's all standardized. Good example of this is if you go into the expression engine code base, you can see that it ships with its own PHP unit XML to make sure that all of our tests work exactly the same. Whether me, just a random coder off the street, or I'm assuming Yuri on that team being able to have the exact same experience, really having the XML file is the way to go. And what you're seeing here is just the tip of the iceberg. There are a ton of configuration options for this. It's actually pretty absurd and worthy of its own couple days of research and digging into, just to find out what's possible and what they do and what each one does. So really, really worth looking into. And there's also something I want to talk about real quick. We're not going to go into it too much, but I learned this one way too late, of something called code coverage. Depending on your setup, you can have your test generate out basically a report saying these methods are tested and these methods are not. So now you have a blueprint of what you need to test. So super, super handy. Code coverage. You really should look into that. Code coverage. So we're going to run some tests. I wanted to do this so that I could show you guys what is actually involved in running a test. And it's not much. In fact, I put together a little mini program that Andy has made available to all of you. There's 2 versions of it. One is fully ready to go. If you just want to go and just follow along, you can just use that one. Or if you want to install out your own stuff and go through the entire flow of it, there's that one there as well. Pro tip, the bigger file is the one that has everything. So keep that in mind. So let's actually do some testing. Let's see how we do this. Do that, and here. We need to change, so this. There we go. Boom. All right, so we're going to share this screen. There you go. Ignore this. Boop. So essentially this is the little program. As you can see, it has a bootstrap file, which is empty. Note the 0. What that basically does is any procedurally generated stuff or logic that has to run before your tests, you would put in your bootstrap. So a good example is back in the day before Expression Engine was testable, and it is now, so rock on. You would use your bootstrap file to basically full PHP and Expression Engine into thinking that you have the entire Expression Engine system set up. It was very laborious, super not fun, real pain in the butt, for being honest. But now it's just, you don't really need to worry about too much of any of that. Here's my composer JSON. Let's take a look at that. Ooh, can we zoom in? Well, all right. Essentially, all it is, though, is require dev, and I'm saying give me a PHP unit. And that's it. That's literally it. Everything else is your standard composer file. There's nothing really there. It's just another dependency, but you want to put it in the required dev option so it doesn't get shipped with all of your stuff, which is how Expression Engine goes. If you go and download Expression Engine right now, you will not get any tests. You will not get any PHP unit because it's only there for development. So they remove that stuff smartly. It's good. And really, that's it. I mean, insofar as like setting it up. So for us to run tests, literally that's it. I just type vendor bin PHP unit and it runs them. Now let's see what those tests are. This is it. This is all a test is. I'm saying I have a script called FizzBuzz, which is actually, I did make this to work, if anyone's curious, where it's a FizzBuzz object, basically. If you're not familiar with what FizzBuzz is, it's, well, you should look into it. It's basically just a generic program that most people use for a litmus on somebody's abilities. Write me a FizzBuzz script to do this. That's all it is. But with this, what we want to do is verify it, right? So I have a FizzBuzz object, and I need to make sure that my isFizzBuzz method returns back false on bad numbers, right? So I'm doing that twice just for overlap to make sure. And then we want to test it for the good values. And isFizzBuzz, if you're not familiar, FizzBuzz is every value that is divisible by 15, it should output the word FizzBuzz. So in fact, take a look at this. This is actually it right here. The simple program. I have some more scaffolding up here to do the calculations, but it's a very, very simple and straightforward program. But so for each one of them, we want to test every single method. We want to make sure that everything is structured the way that we want, and that if I go in later and I change something, that it yells at me. So let's actually do that. Let's go and change this so that, let's just change that to 14. So I broke my code, right? We run our test again, and boom, it fails. And it tells me where it failed. Doesn't tell me why. Well, it does tell you why, and that like it failed asserting that false is true, but it points me in the direction of, oh crap, I broke something and it broke there, and so I need to fix that.
Hey,
So,
Eric.
super. Yes, sir.
Hey, I was just going to jump in here. Can we try to adjust maybe your system level zoom or something?
Yeah,
I think
I don't
we're
know
having
how
a
to do
little
that.
harder job reading. I don't know if you can't do it individually app, then maybe like on your system level display or something.
Oh,
Yeah, Oliver said maybe reduce your overall screen resolution. Oh, whoa, hello. That's better. And if you guys can comment on the comment in the chat when stuff looks good. Yeah, it looks really good right now.
okay. Yeah, I was able to zoom in using a mouse wheel. Nice. Okay.
Oh, there you go. Very cool. All right, thanks.
So yeah, point being though, it lets me know that I broke something, which is the entire point. If I was to ship this, it's going to break. It's not going to be good for anybody. So now I know that something broke, and it lets me know where something broke. It's really pretty straightforward. So we only ended up writing 3 test methods here. Let's see. Nah, my little trick for increasing it didn't work there. Let's see, view. Ooh. There you go. Alt Shift plus. Oh, Lord. All right. So if we wanted to write another test, because right now it's only covering 2 methods, you can see it's actually really, really simple. So just make sure that you prefix all of your tests with the word test. And then we like to be descriptive in our test names. So let's see, what do we want to test? We're going to test the isFizz method. Test isFizz bad value. I always like to do that, to do both. Let me test it when I give it a bad value to make sure that it fails. And let me test it with giving it a good value to make sure that it succeeds. Just to kind of cover both cases, because there's false positive potential, right? It fails on this, but it didn't catch it on the other, that type of thing. Boom. So let's assert false. And you can see a lot of these. So there's assert false, assert not false. In fact, let's do this. There are a ton of assertions. Assert that something contains something, that it's has the right count, that it is an instance of. There are a ton. And then that by itself, too, is well worth looking into the various options, because you don't really know what you need to test until something starts failing. So let's go FizzBuzz, boom, isFizz. And I believe this needs to be divisible by 3. So let's go ahead and give it a 7. Right? And this one should pass. Oh, wait. No, because I also broke my other stuff. Okay. There you go. Right? So writing tests is a rather straightforward and easy enough thing, but it is a deep well. And definitely something worth digging into wholeheartedly. Both feet, just jump into it and see just what you can do to stabilize your code base and the user experience. So that's some tests. Now let's do, wait, there we go. And share the other screen. Boom. All Oh, wow, it didn't keep my place. What is going on here? All right, well. All right, so yeah. One of the other things I wanted to talk about is how we can use unit testing beyond just I wrote an add-on and let me make sure that it can go ahead and run properly. You can use it to test the entire site, to have site level tests. We used to do that back in my startup days. Anything that changed within the config file or with templates, we would always want to have a test for it. So we'd use it to verify that the site config was set up, that we had like the Stripe API keys in there, and that the values weren't empty, or that we the MailChimp credentials were all in there for their API. But basically making sure that when we went live, that everything was there and everything was working as expected. So site config details, templates, file structure and permissions. What about that? So like your site has image uploads. You need to make sure that you have the file system structure in place, the images, uploads, whatever your custom directory is called, making sure that it's writable so that files can actually be uploaded to it. Database structure, making sure that the custom tables that you created are there and ready, and that there's data available to it. The data that you need is available to it. There is a add-on that I released about a year ago. Actually, it was right around 6.1 when Expression Engine released their console command stuff, which is hands down one of my favorite new pieces of tech that Expression Engine has. The console routing, it's really well done. But essentially what this allows you to do, it's called a EE unit test. It's open on GitHub, and I'll get a link for everybody. But it allows you to run PHP unit through the Expression Engine Bootstrap. So everything that we've done so far, it's been standalone. You have your Composer project and your PHP unit and all that stuff for the FizzBuzz. But there's really no way to have the Expression Engine Bootstrap in there and all the scaffolding and all the tooling that Expression Engine has easily. Refer you guys back to the Bootstrap file. We don't want to do that anymore. So with the EE unit test add-on, that allows you to run everything within Expression Engine, with it being connected to the database and having the Bootstrap all set up, and everything's already there, just like any other Expression Engine site. But you don't have to really do any of the laborious bootstrapping of everything. This brings us to the question of what to test. Used to be back in the day that testing was everything. You wanted as close to 100% test coverage as you possibly could. In fact, this is probably why it died out in favor, because frankly, that's not very practical. And realistically, what's a good way to phrase this? It's a disservice to your clients to spend their money writing tests for things that aren't important, that if they don't really want it. So I generally have a couple rules when it comes to unit testing. One is I don't unit test legacy code. We're not paid to refactor. Nobody's going to care that we spent 3 months rewriting our entire application to make it unit testable when those problems aren't really happening. So best to think about tomorrow. Legacy code, wait until you refactor naturally. So a client comes to you and says, hey, we want to redo this feature. Cool, that's a great time to start unit testing. But today, with no real need, it doesn't make any economic sense, and it doesn't really provide any real value. As you know, that said, though, if you make money from a specific code base, if a good example, Expression Engine absolutely should have unit tests, and it does tons of unit tests, way more unit tests than you probably think is necessary, but they're all necessary because their business relies on that software. Another example of things to unit test is any real business logic. So the core of it, like let's say you have a system where it's like every member whose birthday is in June, this special thing happens. Well, you want to have unit tests to make sure that that actually keeps happening, that it doesn't, especially with dates and times, right? Time zones. Mm-hmm. And then once you have your tests going, I have a neat little plan where every single bug, if I have a test suite available on the code base and a bug report comes in, I'm writing a test for that bug. We don't want that bug to come back. So we have a test, and now we have confidence that that bug will not reappear in its existing state. It'll definitely reappear in a new variant, but we want to make sure that bugs are taken care of and bugs don't reappear as much as possible. So here's kind of something. I was going back and forth with my subtitle on that of contradicting, but hopefully you guys are going to walk away from this being like, okay, unit testing seems really interesting and neat. I'm going to get into it. There's a lot of, what's the right word? Contradicting information that just aren't really based or isn't really based in reality when it comes to unit testing. And one of them, and this one I will take to my grave, you'll see a lot of articles saying write tests as you're writing code. I don't know who these developers are that have things presented to them in such a way where they know before they start the entire flow of a program, but my code's iterative. I start it by blank sheet of paper in line one. And eventually, once you figure out the paradigm and the flow and all the little inconsistencies that come up with client work, you just cannot, you're going to spend more time writing tests than you're going to be writing your actual product. And again, we're in client services. Time is money. Our bosses cannot afford to pay us to not have a deliverable that the client's going to get value out of. Another thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is dig deep into PHP unit and the various tooling that they have. The XML file for sure, phpunit.xml. Google it. It is a very, very handy piece of tech. But there's also things called mock objects, which is that is a topic unto itself. But essentially what that is going back to our dependency injection example, it allows you to pass a fake object to your code, and your code thinks it's the exact same code. Sorry, I have people vacuuming next door. And remember, not every project needs tests. If your client can't afford it, well, then they don't get tests. And that's probably something that they're not going to really care about. Because again, we have to remember that time is money. And our clients are there we're there with our clients to solve their specific problems. And if they can't afford, or if even the value of having the test doesn't economically line up, here's an example. A client pays you, a certain amount of money to build out this little project to upload an image. Well, if the image uploader breaks, they can just go and fix it and, maybe an hour or two of dead time or downtime, which is infinitely cheaper than, the tens of thousands of hours it's going to take to write out a complete test suite for their specific real niche problem, right? The economics just aren't there. Like you're not going to spend a couple grand to ensure an issue that only costs $100 is going, it has to be of value. And strictly type coding with what had happened with PHP 7, where you can start doing things like saying that this variable is an integer or this method always returns this object. That makes testing a lot easier because you don't need to test for those things anymore. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, because your code is tightly or strictly typed, that this method is always going to return a Boolean or a specific object instance or something like that. So it just makes it a lot easier. This is my way of saying, start strictly typing your code. There's really no no downside and just tons of benefits. And yeah, so there you guys go. Unit testing. Are there any questions, comments, suggestions?
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. All right.
Yeah.
So if you guys do have questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A.
Yeah, I don't know why my slides aren't lining up anymore.
Look good to me. See, the thing is people don't know when they're out of order, Eric. Only you know that. So.
By the way, what was the animated GIFs weird for anyone else?
They're a little choppy, but they look fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Robin says, I know EE has done this tons of times. Fix a bug, you add a test. Makes so much sense when possible. Yes.
Nice. Thanks, Carl.
Yeah.
And Robin.
All right. No questions, guys?
I mean, it's either it was so
Very cool.
good that there's no questions, or it was so bad people are like, I don't even know how to add to this.
I think it was really good.
Thanks, man.
Unit tests are always one of those things that it seems to make sense when you hear it and everything, and then it's just a matter of jumping in there and doing it. So
yeah, it really is a discipline unto itself.
Yeah,
truly.
Well, and just like you were talking about the iterative, I think so many times developers are just pushing to get the problem solved and out the door, and it's just more time to write tests and more time to think about that. But
right,
you just got to do it as you go. I know we do that a lot. We try to add, I know at least our Cypress tests on the front end, whenever bugs come out and we fix them, we try to, write that test when we solve it so that we can automatically test for it later. So.
Mm-hmm.
P says she has to try it on her own before she can ask. Yeah. What's that? What'd you say, Eric?
I didn't know that paradigm. That's crazy.
Yeah. Oliver says, do you write thoughts for testing ideas as comments in your code as you go?
Generally not. No, not as comments. Yeah, it's more because for me, once the tests come in, you have to keep in mind too. Once your tests come in, you're essentially locking your program's paradigm, right? As soon as I say that this array always has 5 keys, well, that array always has 5 keys. There's no, I can't expand on it anymore. So I generally wait until my program's in a solid place and I know exactly what the intent is, and I have an idea of the paradigms that were created to make it work. And then I may write tests to enforce that paradigm further, but usually it's very much dependent on what the code is. So
Sure.
a good example would be like the, let me see, what have I written some tests for with the EE? There's that new fancy schmancy form, CP form object. Super fancy, by the way, guys. If you haven't looked into it, it's really cool. The community built it, community designed it, and it really does a lot. It basically, you can make shared forms using objects now, but it's in 7. I believe it's maybe backported. I don't know enough to talk about that. But a lot of the tests, I didn't write the test for any of that until until the code was in a good enough place where we knew, this is how the code is going to be set up and formatted and the paradigm for it. So as soon as we knew that, then it was like, okay, now we can kind of lock this into place. But right. Yeah, you really want to know in advance before you start writing your test of what the intended outcome is.
Yeah, and Eric's one of those few people, obviously, that he can look back at his code and know what he was writing versus the rest of us who have no clue what we even did to write tests about it later. So.
I don't really sell to clients.
You see Robin's next one.
I did, yeah. So Robin asked, how do you sell testing to clients? I generally don't. If the budget allows, then I'll try to use those. But generally speaking, unless you're dealing with a tech savvy client who's been down the road a few times, where you can say the phrase like, well, when something breaks, they're not going to understand it. And it's how can I put this? I feel scummy trying to propose it. It's almost like one of those like upsell things or the undercarriage coating when you go buy a car, like it's just, it's a real tough sell unless they know what the entire problem is that's being solved. So no, generally not. But if the budget allows, like let's say a client gives me enough budget and time to do it, absolutely, why not? Like they're paying for it, and I want all the budget and I want all the time to do it. Absolutely.
I mean, depending on the project, that could definitely not necessarily be an upsell, but just one of the points for why they should go with your go with you as the developer is if you can tell them your code's testable and we're going to prevent all these issues and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I do. Then when they go to other developers and other developers are oh, unit test, what's that? Then that makes you look a lot better when you're proposing that too. So.
It's actually a really good idea. Yep.
Oliver says, so do you finish your code and then think about testing as a whole separate phase afterwards?
Yeah, actually, traditionally, yes, sir. Yep. That's because again, like remember, once you start writing your tests, you're locking your code down. And like, imagine this paradigm, right? I have opened up my editor. I'm starting with a blank sheet of paper and I'm writing my test and I'm writing my object. I'm writing the test. I'm writing my object. And then a week later, I decide, oh crap, that's not good. I need to change it so it does something different. Well, now I have to go back and update all of my tests. So I am lazy, I guess. And we're not really paid for our mistakes. At least I'm not. I don't know about how everybody else does it, but generally if I realize that I made a mistake in my code, I got to eat those costs, like the client paid me for A and I delivered B. That's on me. So, yeah, I would personally prefer to do everything after the fact. Once I know what it is that I'm delivering, then I can write tests and basically put the cement around it where it's always going to work in this way. Yeah, in fact, I see a comment from Abi Nirwan. Yeah, when you're doing your own add-on, yeah. In fact, where I got really into unit testing was when I started building out Backup Pro 6-7 years ago to work with various CMSs and just realize like I needed to separate the core product from the CMS. And then once I had the core product standalone, it was like, okay, well, now I need to make sure that that it works, that it's the exact same experience when you go to WordPress versus Concrete 5 or versus, Expression Engine 2 versus Expression Engine 3. Like those, it needs to be a consistent program. So yeah, unit testing add-ons. In fact, I would go out on a limb and say all add-on developers should have at least internal unit tests. Just some way where they have the confidence, and I'm sure that most of them do. In fact, I'd be surprised at some of the names in here if they didn't. With confidence, I'd be like, yeah, no, they definitely have unit tests.
All right. Anybody else?
Yeah, and for what it's worth, seriously, if you haven't downloaded the zip file that Andy provided, the unit test talk zip file, be sure to do that because it's very simple, straightforward, and very what's the right word, siloed unit testing example. So you can take those same paradigms and move them over into any other program, and it should, there's no fluff in the example. So if you're looking to get started with unit testing, and I really hope that a lot of people are, that should be a decent enough foundation to at least get you set up and started on this way long and super fun journey. Unit testing really is fun, especially there's a neat thrill you get when you have a very in-depth test suite and everything passes. Where you're like that sense of confidence of I'm good, everything works. I can look my client in the eye and I can sleep soundly tonight. I know this works, which is pretty rare in our line of work. The level of confidence, it's this is a very stressful business. We've all chosen to.
Oliver says, "Do you test your test?"
No. No. Just.
All right. Anything else, guys, from Eric before we let him go?
That's
all right.
Sweet.
Eric, thank you very much for your time. I know you're doing this, and then Eric's also going to be presenting in Philadelphia at the Fall Summit. So he's been very generous with his time to put all this together, and evading spider bites and managing everything else to make this happen for us. So Eric, we really appreciate you. Appreciate all you're doing for the community and for the conference stuff. So thank you very much.
I appreciate it too, guys.
All right.
Talk to you later. Stop sharing and zip my lip.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and remove you so you don't have to do that. So thank you, Eric. Next, from Expression Engine team, you guys have me. Yay. So Tom is actually out of the office enjoying some much needed R&R this week. So from Expression Engine team updates, just a few things which most of you guys have already seen. We've posted several videos from Tom on YouTube over the last week, and I've seen some comments on that, but just trying to share some direction of where we're headed. So obviously, or hopefully everybody knows that we released 7 back in August, so Expression Engine version 7. And we appreciate everybody's feedback as we went through the pricing changes and all that and how that was going to work out. We had some great conversation with the community and really cleared some things up. So we appreciate all the effort that went into helping us settle on the pricing setup. And feel free to let us know if you guys have any questions about that. You can ask some questions here if you want to, and I'll try to answer them the best we can about Expression Engine 7. So 3 YouTube videos we posted lately. The first one was talking about Expression Engine in a decoupled architecture. So we're excited to move forward with that. And if you were able to snag a seat in Philadelphia for this Fall Summit, Brian from our team, who is unfortunately under the weather with COVID this week, is going to be leading, kind of facilitating the discussion on Expression Engine and decoupled architecture. So that's going to be, I'm not going to get too much into it because number one, I'm not the expert. That's going to be how we implement Twig. So we're going to be able to have Twig templates in Expression Engine. I know everyone's been very patient waiting on how we want to do that. And we wanted to do that part of a larger changes overall, not just drop that in there. So there's going to be Twig implementation, and then also using Expression Engine, again, decoupled architecture, headless, all those kind of buzzwords that are going around now. So using with other systems as well. And so Brian, I think Tom's going to be in there. If it's not 100% ready by the Fall Summit, then it'll be a discussion of what we have so far and where we're headed with that. But definitely a discussion of how you can use Expression Engine in a decoupled architecture. Second of all, we posted about migrating schemas from environment to environment. That's mainly going to be around your channel settings, your categories, fields, those kind of stuff. You know, we all struggle with, we have a dev environment, we add fields, we modify our schema, And then how do we get that to production without shutting down production for a day while we make all those updates? We are working on a system that's going to be able to help you migrate your schema changes, or at least your structural changes from dev to staging to production or throughout your environments. Again, that's not going to involve data. So I want to make that very clear. We have not solved the content migration problem necessarily with this. We're going to continue on that front and see what happens, but there are definitely some roadblocks as many others before us have tried to solve that problem. And we continue to work on that. But definitely this is going to help a lot of the main issue with your field setup, your structure for your native fields. I think Brian Litzinger was talking with Yuri yesterday on the Slack about hooking that in for add-on developers for third party. I'm sure there will be some development along that, if not in the first iteration, later on. The third thing, I think we just posted this video this morning, is third-party license validation. So we're opening up the same license validation that we're using for Pro to third-party add-on developers. Again, one of the goals that we have with Expression Engine is to support the community, support the ecosystem, support those who want to grow with the community and with the ecosystem. And we feel that license validation is a big way to help add-on developers honestly make a profit from the work that they're doing. And if they want to participate in that program, then they'll be able to use the license validation and be able to make sure everybody's using their licenses correctly, of course. And then also that's going to play into in the future as we move into a store in app, where I know everybody wants to be able to grab add-ons from inside the control panel. And we mentioned that we want to move in that direction as well. And these are just, all of these are small steps that's going to help with that as well. So that's what we're working on this month, hoping to have a lot of that wrapped up by the Fall Summit. So by the beginning of October or mid-October, we'll continue to update everybody on where we are with that. But that's really it from Expression Engine team. If anybody has any questions for me or about those items, I'm happy to try to answer them. And then I know Matt and Yuri are in chat, and they might be able to help out as well if you had any questions about those items. And I don't see anything popping up now. Awesome. Very cool. Well, you guys know where to find us. The Expression Engine team is always in Slack on the EE CMS Slack. I encourage you to get involved with that. If you're not on there, that's where the majority of the community is. And then we also have the forums as well that we try to check and keep up to date. Of course, if you don't know, I'm kind of playing dual roles here. So I am part of the Expression Engine team. I'm also part of the EE Comp team. And so it's always fun to try to help be the liaison between those two as we support and grow the community. All right, I think this is my magical button to share my screen. So, of course, thanks everybody for being here today. Again, I want to give love to our sponsors, Carthrop Hop Studios. I think we have some Hop Studio members in the chat today, so glad to see you guys joining us. And Carthrop's actually going to give away some Carthrop licenses at the Fall Summit, so we're excited about that. So if you're coming to the Fall Summit, we look forward to seeing you there. Green Line Creative with Julie and Doug over at Triple Nerd Score, always great supporters of the conference and our events. W3 Care and IC360 Creative Arc. Definitely try to give those guys some love. They do a lot for our community. I'm not going to beg for money anymore. You can always go and donate. Next up, obviously, this is a little old slide. But our next event is the Fall Summit. So I hope you were able to grab a seat at the Fall Summit for Philadelphia coming up in October. Registration is currently closed. But if you really beg me or have a need, we might have some room for a couple extra seats. Again, this year, we're really looking forward to it. And I really hate it for those that couldn't make it this year, because I think it's going to be a really good kind of different fall experience for the community. A lot more, everything's going to be more discussion based. Everything's going to be facilitated talks where we kind of learn together and grow together. One of the reasons we had to close registration is because we're booking everybody's hotel room. So everyone's going to be in the same hotel. We are going to, if you're going to the conference or the fall summit and you happen to be on here, we are going to have happy hours Wednesday night and Thursday night now. Thanks to Doug over at Triple Nerd Score. He's helping us out with that. So definitely be sure to give him some love for your free drinks on Thursday night. But it's going to be a great time of community development and networking and growth. And then after the fall summit, we have Eric. I think there's a limit on the drinks there, bud. So after the fall summit in November, we're going to have another virtual community meetup just like this. I'd love to hear your ideas. The topic we thought we were going to be able to present on is not going to happen. So we do need to figure that out. I had posted in the EE conference channel if you guys thought about maybe a show and tell where everybody can bring some projects that they're working on and just discuss what they're doing. It looks like people think it's a good idea, but not a lot of people willing to also share their projects. So if you would like to talk on anything, if you have a presenter that you think would benefit the community, and you would like us to reach out to him or her or they and, get them on here, or if you would like to reach out and put them in contact with us, we'd love to have new speakers. We'd love to have people grow the community. But again, if you want to do a show and tell, if you guys are interested in that, let me know. I'd love to see what the community is working on, and I think others would too. Just like the idea with our fall summit today, we're believers that everybody in our community can help each other. We may have experts that are presenting or experts that, presenting at the conferences, but the experts that are presenting don't always have all the answers. But as a community, we're stronger together. And I believe that with all the members in our community, if we put our heads together, we have a lot of the answers that we're looking for. And so it's always great to have other community members share and just discuss what we're going through. A lot of us go through struggles day in, day out in your agency or in your specific job role, and just discussing how we can do those things better. We'd love to have community members step up and share and just have discussions around that. So November meetup, if you're interested in that, let me know, or if you just have any other ideas. And then that'll be it for this year. And then we'll wrap up 2022. And we'll kick off 2023 in January with the next community meetup. So with that, we'll go ahead and end the conference or the meetup today. That's just on our conference. And that's all of them. So thanks, everyone. Talk to you guys later. Bye.